I never planned to disappear. If you had told me a year ago that I'd walk away from everyone I'd ever called family, I would have laughed at the absurdity of it. Family was supposed to be the one thing that stayed, even when everything else crumbled. But sometimes, the people who share your blood can drain you dry in ways strangers never could. Sometimes, you don't realize how heavy their presence is until you finally step away and breathe without it. I grew up being the responsible one. My mother used to call me her rock, though she rarely noticed that rocks don't feel, they just endure. My younger sister, Dana, was the charming one, the light, the one people naturally loved. She was beautiful in the easy way people admired from across a room, the kind who made life seem like it would always work out for her. I loved her, honestly. For most of my life, I truly did. I thought protecting her, helping her, cleaning up after her was my duty. It's what older sisters do, right? When our parents died within 2 years of each other, Dana was already a mother. Her daughter, Mia, was only 5 at the time. I was 28, single, and working as a financial consultant in a mid-sized firm, stable, comfortable, and quietly proud that I had built something on my own. Dana, on the other hand, was in the middle of a divorce. Her husband had left suddenly. One morning, he just didn't come back from a business trip. It was one of those situations that made you question how well you could ever know a person. I remember the call. Dana's voice was sharp with panic. "He's gone, just gone, and I don't know what to do." She cried so hard I could barely understand her. Within an hour, I was at her doorstep with groceries, a folder full of budget sheets, and an unspoken promise. I'll take care of it. And I did. For 8 years. I paid her late bills, fixed her credit, got her car out of repossession, and covered Mia's school fees when Dana forgot deadlines. I never complained, not once, because that's what you do for family. You help, even when you're tired, even when you're barely holding your own life together. You help. Dana was never malicious, at least not in the beginning. She'd thank me profusely, send me little gifts, a mug that said "best sister ever," or a scented candle I never used. She'd tell friends, "My sister's the smart one. She's basically my guardian angel." It sounded sweet, but over time the tone changed. Gratitude slowly became expectation, and expectation quietly grew into entitlement. It started with small things. "You're already ordering online, could you just add one more thing for Mia?" Or "You have the rewards card, right? Just use yours, I'll send you the cash later." She rarely did, but it didn't feel worth arguing over $20 or $50. Then it became larger. "Could you help me with rent this month? Just this once." Then, "You know Mia's birthday is coming up. She's been begging for that phone. I'll pay half, promise." The half never came. Still, I didn't mind, not outwardly. I loved my niece. From the moment she was born, I adored her. She had this soft, curious look in her eyes when she was little, always asking questions, wanting to understand the world. I was the one who read her bedtime stories when Dana was too tired or out on dates. I was the one she called Auntie Lila, with a sleepy smile as she curled up next to me on the couch. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe it was the way Dana spoke about me when I wasn't around. Maybe it was the subtle rolling of Mia's eyes whenever I said no to something. Or maybe it was just the simple truth. Kids watch how their parents treat people, and they learn from it. By the time Mia turned 13, she had perfected her mother's effortless cruelty, the kind that came wrapped in charm and coated in laughter. I noticed it in small interactions. I'd offer to drive her somewhere, and she'd sigh dramatically and say, "It's fine. Mom says your car smells like paperwork." I'd bring her a gift, something thoughtful, maybe a book or art supplies, and she'd mumble a half-hearted thanks, followed by a smirk toward her mother. I'd tell myself she was just a teenager, that she'd grow out of it. But inside, a part of me began to tighten, like a quiet fist around my patience. The dinner that changed everything was supposed to be a simple family celebration. Dana had invited about 30 people, friends, neighbors, and co-workers, to celebrate Mia's 13th birthday. She rented out a cozy restaurant downtown, decorated with silver balloons and little fairy lights, the kind of evening that's meant to feel warm and joyful. I arrived early, as usual. Dana texted me the list of small things she forgot: candles, plates, napkins, and of course, the cake topper. I picked them up without complaint. When I entered the restaurant, Dana greeted me with a quick hug, already surrounded by her laughing friends. "Oh, there's my dependable sister," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "always saving me." It was said with a laugh, but it landed heavy. People chuckled. I smiled, because that's what I always did. Throughout the evening, I watched them. Dana glowing under the attention, Mia bouncing from guest to guest, giggling, posing for photos. I sat at the end of the table, quietly content just to see them happy. But there was an ache in me too, a small hollow spot where gratitude used to live. Then came the moment. It was gift time. Piled high on the table were boxes wrapped in glossy paper and bows. I handed over my gift, a neatly wrapped package that held an $850 phone. It wasn't about impressing anyone. I genuinely wanted to give Mia something she'd love. I'd saved for it for weeks, even cut back on a few personal things. She tore open the wrapping, squealed when she saw the logo, and lifted it like a trophy. "Oh my God, it's the one I wanted," she said, beaming. I felt my heart swell. For a moment, it felt worth it. All the quiet sacrifices. All the just one more times. Then she giggled, loud enough for everyone to hear. She said, "Mom says if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." The words hit like ice water down my spine. There was a beat of silence and then laughter. Dana laughed. Her friends laughed. Even Mia laughed, covering her mouth as if it was just a silly joke. All 30 people at that table were laughing, except me. I sat still, my face calm, my pulse quiet. I didn't speak. I didn't argue or ask why. I just looked at them, at Dana, her eyes sparkling, not a hint of remorse. At Mia, her shoulders shaking with amusement, still holding the phone I had bought. Something inside me shifted then. Not rage, not even sadness. Just a sudden sharp clarity, the kind you feel when the fog finally lifts and you see what's been in front of you all along. I smiled. It was small, almost invisible. I nodded slowly and said, "That's funny." And then, quietly, while they continued laughing, I took out my phone. 2 taps. That's all it took. I opened my banking app, scrolled through the list of automatic payments, rent transfers, utility bills, credit card authorizations, subscription payments, insurance renewals, all tied to Dana's account. All set up by me years ago because she never had time to deal with all that boring stuff. I tapped disable, then confirm. And with that, every single thread that tied me to their world, their comfort, their convenience, their stability, vanished. That night, when the laughter died down and the guests went home, I packed a single black backpack. Just the essentials: documents, clothes, my laptop, and a photograph of my parents. No goodbyes. No explanations. By morning, I was gone. I left the apartment keys on the counter next to a small envelope. Inside, it was a single note that read, "Thank you for reminding me how invisible I am." And in the corner of the living room, I left that black backpack. Inside, they would find something unexpected. Something that wasn't about revenge, but about reclaiming peace. But that part of the story, what was inside, I'll get to soon. For now, just know this: walking away was the quietest, strongest thing I've ever done. When I closed the door behind me that night, the sound was softer than I expected. A quiet click, nothing dramatic. Yet it felt final, like a seal pressed on an old letter. I walked down the hall of that apartment building one last time, listening to the faint hum of the elevator, the low buzz of someone's television. It was almost midnight, and for the first time in years, no one was waiting for me to solve anything. I didn't have a grand plan. I didn't even know where I would sleep. I just knew I couldn't stay another minute in a place that treated my kindness as currency to be spent and mocked. I called a cab, tossed my backpack in the seat beside me, and told the driver to head toward the old coastal town 2 hours away, a quiet place where my parents once took us on summer weekends. The ride was silent except for the engine and the low hum of the tires on the highway. I remember staring out the window, watching the city lights thin out until darkness took over. It wasn't sadness that filled me. It was stillness, an unfamiliar calm that made me realize how loud my life had been, how much noise I had mistaken for love. By the time we reached the coast, the sky was gray with dawn. I found a small bed and breakfast run by an older couple who didn't ask many questions. I checked in under my middle name, paid cash, and slept for nearly 15 hours. When I woke, I felt weightless, as if my bones were hollow. Meanwhile, back in the city, Dana was waking to her own kind of silence. I hadn't planned for revenge. My goal was peace. But peace, I've learned, sometimes arrives in the form of consequences. That morning, her rent transfer didn't go through. The utility company called about an overdue balance. Her phone bill, linked to my account, was suspended. Even her streaming services blinked off one by one. At first, she probably thought it was some system error. She'd text me, no doubt, with her usual tone of half concern, half annoyance. "Hey, can you check the payments? Something's off." Except this time, the message never delivered. I had changed my number, closed my accounts, and transferred my savings into a new one under my own name only. The clean break was shockingly easy. Years of helping others had made me an expert at managing details. All I had to do was turn that skill toward my own escape. From what I later learned, through a mutual friend who couldn't resist gossip, Dana didn't realize I was truly gone until late that evening. She came home from work to find the apartment unusually still. My room was empty except for that black backpack on the table. She must have hesitated before opening it. Maybe she even called my name, half expecting me to appear and explain it all away like I always did, but I wasn't there. Inside the backpack, she found an envelope labeled "For You and Mia," and beneath it, a small collection of things. A folder of bank statements, each showing payments I'd made on her behalf for the past 8 years. Every bill, every subscription, every just this once bailout, neatly highlighted in yellow. A stack of receipts, some faded, some recent, bundled with a rubber band. At the top was one for the $850 phone, and finally, a small wooden box. Inside it, a single key, hers, attached to a tag that read, "Freedom, if you choose it." The letter inside the envelope wasn't angry. I remember writing it by hand, careful to keep the tone honest but gentle. It began with, "Dana, I'm not leaving because I hate you. I'm leaving because I forgot how to love myself while staying near you. You once told me I was your rock, but rocks sink when the tide changes. I need to float now." I explained that every payment she depended on had been transferred back to her responsibility, that I had cleared what was mine and forgiven what she owed. I wished her stability, clarity, and the strength to teach me a kindness by example. At the bottom, I wrote, "If you ever wonder why I disappeared, remember that dinner. Listen again to the laughter. It wasn't about the words. It was about how easily they came. That's what broke me." I signed it simply Lila. The friend who told me later said Dana cried for hours. Then apparently she got angry, furious, defensive, shouting about how ungrateful I was, how I had embarrassed her in front of everyone by walking out. But as the days went by and reality sank in, the anger faded. The bills kept arriving. The credit cards kept bouncing. Responsibility, once invisible to her, started to take shape. Mia, I heard, was quiet for days. She had lost service on her shiny new phone because the bill hadn't been paid. At school, she told friends that her aunt had gone traveling, but even in photos, her smile looked thinner. Maybe she began to understand something that night. The weight of words, the price of cruelty. As for me, I settled into a small rhythm by the sea. I rented a modest apartment overlooking the harbor, took freelance clients online, and started walking every morning before sunrise. The air smelled of salt and old wood, and for the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts without interruption. At first, I checked my phone compulsively, expecting messages, apologies, maybe even pleas to come back. None came, and that was strangely comforting, because it meant I was no longer part of the cycle, no longer the safety net. I spent my days rediscovering small joys, cooking for one, reading on the porch, sketching the boats drifting in and out of the dock. I even joined a local library club where no one knew my story. When people asked about family, I simply said, "It's complicated," and left it at that. Months passed. Seasons changed. The calm that replaced the chaos wasn't loud or cinematic. It was slow, steady, and deeply healing. Then one afternoon, about 6 months after I left, I received a letter forwarded through the bed and breakfast owner. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky but familiar. Dana. I sat with it for a long time before opening it. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet readiness. Whatever it contained, I knew it wouldn't pull me back. Inside was a short note. "Lila, I found the folder. I read every page. I didn't realize how much you carried for me. I'm ashamed. I'm also grateful. Mia misses you. I told her why you left." She cried. "I did too. We're trying to manage things ourselves now. It's hard, but maybe it should be. I understand if you don't want contact, but if you ever think of us, know that we're learning. Thank you for everything, even the silence. Dana." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and watched the sunset from my window. There were no tears, no rush of emotion, just a quiet sense that something had finally closed. I didn't write back. Not out of spite, but because sometimes peace doesn't need a reply. In the months that followed, I found myself reflecting on what revenge really means. People imagine it as fire and fury, a dramatic gesture, a final blow. But I've come to believe that the calmest form of revenge is withdrawal. It's the act of removing your energy from a place that feeds on it. It's choosing stillness over noise, solitude over manipulation. Walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom earned the hard way. I began journaling about the experience, not to relive it, but to understand it. Page by page, I unpacked the years of enabling disguised as love, the guilt disguised as loyalty, the laughter disguised as affection. I wrote about how easy it is to lose yourself in the role of helper, how people often confuse selflessness with servitude. One evening, as the tide came in and the horizon turned gold, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The bitterness had drained out quietly, leaving room for something softer, compassion maybe. I hoped Dana and Mia were doing better. I hoped they had learned the kind of lessons only absence can teach. Sometimes I still imagine that dinner scene, the laughter, the lights, the look on Mia's face. But now when I do, I don't feel hurt. I feel grateful, because that moment, cruel as it was, set me free. And freedom, I've learned, doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with a single calm decision made in silence. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt invisible, taken for granted, dismissed, or mocked for your kindness, I want you to remember, you don't owe anyone endless forgiveness. You owe yourself peace. Leaving isn't always running away. Sometimes it's returning to yourself. If this story spoke to you, if it made you pause or see a bit of your own reflection in it, take a moment to breathe. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, quiet stories about strength, calm revenge, and self-reclamation, please like, share, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge. Your support helps these stories reach others who need to hear them too. A year passed before I realized how much I had changed. Not in some grand cinematic way. There was no sudden transformation or new me moment. It happened quietly, like the way dawn creeps in without asking for attention. One morning I looked around my small seaside apartment and realized I wasn't waiting anymore, not for messages, apologies, or even closure. I was simply living. That was the real revenge. If you could call it that. Not revenge against anyone, but against the version of myself who thought love meant endurance. Life in the coastal town had a rhythm that suited me. I worked remotely now, consulting small local businesses on financial planning. It was modest work compared to my old corporate projects, but it paid enough for comfort, and more importantly, it kept my mind calm. I spent mornings walking along the beach, afternoons working in a sunlit cafe, and evenings reading or sketching. The ocean became my therapist, always listening, never judging. The quiet taught me things that years of chaos had drowned out. I learned how much noise I had carried inside me. Other people's worries, expectations, moods. I used to think that being empathetic meant absorbing everyone's emotions, but peace came when I understood that empathy doesn't mean self-erasure. You can care deeply without losing yourself in the process. Every so often I'd think of Dana and Mia, not with anger, but with an odd, gentle curiosity. I didn't check on them, but life has a way of sending small updates through unexpected channels. One came through Mrs. Carter, an old neighbor who'd known our family for years. She sent a postcard one spring afternoon, a picture of blooming tulips on the front and a brief note on the back. Ran into Dana at the market last week. She looked good, thinner, calmer. Said she's working part-time and Mia's in a school play. She mentioned you with respect. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled when I read it. Respect. That word hadn't existed between us for so long that it felt almost foreign. But I didn't need to respond. The universe has its own way of closing circles. Around that same time, I began teaching weekend workshops for young women on financial independence. Nothing formal, just small community gatherings at the library. I called it Reclaiming Stability. It wasn't about money alone. It was about control, understanding how easily we give away our autonomy when we let others dictate our worth. The first class only had 5 participants, all nervous and hesitant, reminding me of myself years ago. We talked about budgets and savings, yes, but also about boundaries and emotional spending, the invisible ways people drain us. One woman cried quietly when I said, "You can love people without rescuing them." Later, she told me it was the first time anyone had said that out loud. Those moments began to shape a new purpose for me. My story had started with pain, but it didn't have to end there. Then one afternoon in early autumn, as I was leaving the library, I heard someone call my name. "Lila?" I turned, and there she was, Dana. For a moment I thought I was imagining it. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with silver. She looked older, not in a weary way, but in the way people look when life has finally taught them something real. She smiled, tentative, unsure. I didn't move. I just waited. "I wasn't sure it was you," she said, her voice small but sincere. "I've been thinking about coming here for weeks. I heard from Mrs. Carter that you were living nearby." I nodded slowly, my heart calm but alert. "How are you?" She exhaled, her shoulders softening. "Better, working at a local design store. I handle the accounts. I learned a lot after you left." She gave a small laugh that wasn't bitter. "You'd probably be proud of my spreadsheets." That made me smile, genuinely. "I am," I said quietly. She looked down, fidgeting with the strap of her bag. "Mia's 15 now. She's growing up. We talk a lot about that night." Her eyes glistened for a moment. She doesn't even remember what she said word for word, but she remembers how it made you look. She says she's sorry. The breeze carried the sound of waves behind us. I took a slow breath. I'm glad she understands. "She wants to see you someday," Dana continued. "No pressure, just when you're ready." There was no guilt in her tone, no manipulation. Just honesty. I nodded again. "Maybe one day." She accepted that. "You look peaceful," she said softly. "I never thought I'd say this, but you leaving, it changed everything. It hurt, but it woke us up." We stood there for a while, 2 women who had once lived in the same orbit, but finally found balance by moving apart. When she left, I didn't feel shaken. I felt light. That evening, I sat on my porch and watched the sun dip into the horizon. I thought about how endings often disguise themselves as beginnings. If that cruel laughter at the dinner had never happened, I might still be stuck in the same cycle, loved conditionally, used quietly, invisible in plain sight. Sometimes the harshest moments in life are disguised invitations to freedom. Over the following months, I began writing essays based on my workshops, reflections on boundaries, resilience, and calm revenge. The phrase caught on unexpectedly. Readers wrote from different parts of the world, saying they found comfort in it. Calm revenge, they said, felt different. It wasn't about destruction. It was about dignity. One woman wrote, "Your story helped me leave a toxic workplace without anger, just clarity. I didn't need to win. I just needed to walk away." Another said, "I stopped apologizing for saying no. That was my revenge." Each message reminded me that peace is contagious. You don't have to shout to change something. You just have to act differently, quietly, and consistently. A year and a half after that dinner, I received an email from Mia. It was short, written like someone afraid to take up too much space. "Hi, Aunt Lila. I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I wanted to thank you. Mom told me everything. The payments, the bills, how much you helped us. I didn't understand before. I thought money was just there. I still have the phone you gave me. I pay for it myself now, with my weekend job. Every time I look at it, I remember how awful I was that night. I'm so sorry. I hope you're happy. You deserve that more than anyone I know. Mia." I read that message 3 times. It didn't erase what had happened, but it brought something softer. Grace, maybe. I didn't reply immediately. I waited a few days, then sent a simple response. "Thank you, Mia. I'm proud of you for taking responsibility. Keep being kind, to yourself and others. Love, Aunt Lila." That was it. No long explanation, no emotional outpouring, just truth and closure. It struck me then how revenge, in its purest form, isn't about making others suffer. It's about making them see. And sometimes, when they finally do, what follows isn't gloating. It's peace. Years later, when people in my workshops ask if I ever regretted leaving, I always tell them this: I don't regret walking away. I regret waiting so long to realize I could. Because every moment you spend trying to earn love from people who only take, you drift further from yourself. And when you finally step back, the silence that follows isn't loneliness. It's the sound of your own life returning. One night, 2 summers after I vanished, I met Dana and Mia again. Not planned, just coincidence. It was at a local art fair. Mia was taller, more composed. She hugged me shyly, almost cautiously, as if afraid I might disappear again. Dana stood beside her, smiling quietly. We talked about neutral things: books, the beach, the pastries sold at the stall nearby. It wasn't emotional or awkward. It was peaceful. We had all grown up in our own ways. As they walked away, Mia turned and waved. "See you soon?" she asked. And for the first time, I said, "Yes." And I meant it. That night, back at home, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and realized I had come full circle. Not the same circle of dependence and guilt, but one of understanding. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means no longer wishing for a different past. Peace isn't something you stumble upon. It's something you build, one quiet choice at a time. I never told them this, but that black backpack I left behind wasn't meant to punish. It was a mirror, a way for them to see what I had carried all those years. And when they finally looked, they found not vengeance, but truth. That truth changed us all. So when people hear my story and call it revenge, I smile a little. Because yes, maybe it was, but it wasn't the loud, fiery kind. It was the calm kind. The kind that ends not with shouting, but with silence that finally feels safe. If you've listened this far, maybe a part of you recognizes something familiar. The exhaustion of giving too much, the ache of being unseen. If so, I hope you remember this. You don't have to burn bridges to walk away. Sometimes you can just quietly set them down and let the river take them. Because real revenge isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you can live right, and that more than anything is peace. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect. Not on the pain, but on the power of letting go. And if you'd like to hear more stories about calm revenge, quiet strength, and self-reclamation, please like, share, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge. Every story here is a whisper of resilience, and sometimes that's louder than any scream.